In the American Southwest, a sophisticated regional system once linked hundreds of communities with engineered roads, great houses, and water control works. Within a few decades, it was gone. The centers were abandoned. The roads fell silent. Not because of conquest, not because of a single catastrophe. Something inside the achievement itself had changed. The same pattern appears in the great cities of the classic Maya and in the Western Roman Empire at the height of its administrative and military sophistication. History records these moments as collapse. But they may be something more precise, the point where a society's own problem-solving capacity becomes too expensive to maintain. Why do societies that have become exceptionally good at solving problems eventually lose the ability to keep solving them? Why does success itself seem to raise the cost of continuing? And why, when the costs finally exceed what the society can bear, does simplification, what we call collapse, often look less like failure and more like the only rational option left? The answer lies in how societies actually solve problems. They increase complexity, more specialized roles, more layers of coordination, more infrastructure, more rules, more people whose job is to manage other people. This is not waste. In the beginning, it is highly effective. Early investments in complexity deliver large benefits for relatively low additional cost. But every society eventually reaches a point where the easiest, cheapest solutions have already been used. Further problems must be met with more elaborate, more expensive responses. The benefit gained from each new increment of complexity begins to shrink. The cost of maintaining the whole structure keeps rising. This is the law of diminishing marginal returns applied to problem solving itself. When that curve inverts, when the cost of keeping the system running exceeds the benefit it still delivers, the society becomes fragile. A new stress does not need to be overwhelming. It only needs to arrive when the society can no longer afford its own complexity. At that point, simplification is not collapse in the dramatic sense. It is the point at which people and institutions stop paying a price that no longer makes sense. The Western Roman Empire offers the clearest large-scale demonstration. Early expansion largely paid for itself. Conquered territories supplied slaves, metals, and agricultural surplus that funded further conquest and the growing administrative apparatus. Complexity delivered high returns. By the 3rd and 4th centuries, the easy gains were gone. The empire faced sustained pressure on its frontiers, while the costs of holding the system together continued to climb. Successive emperors responded with the tools they knew: more bureaucracy, more detailed legal codes, more specialized military units, heavier taxation, and repeated debasement of the currency. Each of these measures was a rational attempt to solve immediate problems. Each also increased the long-term cost of maintaining the empire. The marginal return on these investments fell. Peasants and local elites found the burden unsustainable. The central government found it increasingly difficult to pay and supply its own armies. By the 5th century, the Western Empire could no longer afford the complexity required to remain a single coordinated system. What followed was not total destruction, but simplification. The loss of long-distance trade in many regions, the decline of urban life, the reduction of specialized administration, and the devolution of power to smaller, less complex political units. The empire did not fall solely because it was attacked. It reached a state in which it could no longer pay the cost of remaining itself. The southern lowland Maya cities followed a similar internal logic on a different scale. Over centuries, they built extraordinary complexity, monumental architecture, elite hierarchies, writing systems, calendars, and intensive agricultural techniques including terracing and large-scale water storage. These investments allowed larger populations and more coordinated societies to exist in a challenging tropical environment. As population grew and land became more intensively used, new problems appeared: soil depletion, deforestation, competition between centers. The response was more complexity, more construction to display and legitimize elite power, more elaborate ritual systems, more intensive farming. When severe multi-year drought arrived in the 9th century, the marginal benefit of this high-cost system collapsed. The same investments in complexity that had once sustained larger populations now represented an unbearable maintenance burden. Many of the great cities were abandoned within decades. People dispersed into smaller, less complex settlements that required far less coordination and far less surplus to sustain. The drought was real. But the reason it produced systemic collapse rather than temporary hardship was the prior accumulation of complexity, whose returns had already been declining. The Chacoan society of the American Southwest provides perhaps the clearest example of the mechanism at work. Between roughly 1050 and 1130, a regional system of great houses, roads, and water control infrastructure integrated dispersed communities across a difficult arid landscape. The complexity was not accidental. It solved real problems of coordination, resource distribution, and ceremonial legitimacy. When prolonged drought struck in the late 11th and 12th centuries, the benefit of maintaining that regional integration declined sharply. The cost of the roads, the great houses, and the organizational overhead no longer delivered proportional returns. What happened next was striking in its simplicity. People stopped investing in the expensive centers. They walked away. The great houses were abandoned. The regional system fragmented into smaller, locally self-sufficient groups. There was no single dramatic battle or invasion. There was a collective economic decision that the complexity was no longer worth the price. Across these different societies, separated by centuries and continents, the same sequence appears. Problem-solving through increased complexity works powerfully at first. It allows societies to grow, coordinate, and protect themselves at scales that would otherwise be impossible. But every increment of complexity carries ongoing costs. As the easiest solutions are exhausted, those costs rise while the additional benefit shrinks. When the curve inverts, the society is no longer failing to solve problems. It is succeeding at solving them in ways that have become more expensive than the problems themselves justify. At that point, simplification is not collapse in the sense of sudden destruction. It is the point at which the cost-benefit calculation changes and people and institutions stop paying a price that no longer makes sense. This is the hidden system. The same curve has not disappeared. Modern societies continue to respond to problems: economic instability, security threats, environmental stress, technological disruption, by adding layers of complexity, more regulation, more specialized institutions, more infrastructure, more information systems, more global interdependence. Each layer is presented as a solution. Many of them are. But each also raises the baseline cost of keeping the overall system running. The question is no longer simply whether we can devise new solutions. It is whether we can continue to afford the solutions we already have, and the new ones we keep adding. History does not suggest that every complex society must collapse. It suggests that every complex society eventually reaches a point where the marginal return on further complexity falls, and where the choice to simplify in one form or another becomes available.